One of the biggest things I've struggled so much with is this fear of being misunderstood. And then I misunderstood courage too. I thought part of it was being fearless. Actually, no, it's you say what you need to say, and no matter how scared you might feel, anxious you might feel, maybe even terrified, you accept the outcome of that. As part of everything I do in this channel is something that I want to convey somehow. I'm not fearless. You could almost say that I'm actually feeling more fear these days. I'm feeling more embarrassment and more anxiety. But I now have somehow learned to accept that that's going to happen. And then I just do my best with the next step.
Welcome back to Working to Work, a neurodivergent journey for employment. I'm Sam, host and creator of this project. And in this episode, I'm sharing the second part of my conversation with Youngmin Park, a mathematical biologist and professor at the University of Florida. In the first part, Youngmin spoke about his journey to becoming a professor while navigating ADHD, the challenges he experienced, the strengths he had that helped him in that journey, and also how he reframed resilience in ways that were sustainable. In the second part, we'll turn our attention to his YouTube channel, ADHD Mathematician. We explore why he began sharing his journey with ADHD and math publicly, how he approaches openness and vulnerability, including in relation to colleagues and employment, and also the way that his thinking has evolved over time, and also the focus of his channel. We also touch on how the internet can affirm people, but also to silo them, and how in his channel he's tried to create a space that's reflective rather than prescriptive. I unfortunately continue to have some technical challenges with this recording, so apologies again for the less than optimal video quality, but I hope you very much enjoy the conversation and that overrides any technical deficiencies. Please do comment if you have any thoughts about this episode or any questions. I would love to hear them. And without further ado, here is the second part of my interview with Youngmin Park, aka ADHD Mathematician. Youngmin, thank you again for joining me, even though avid viewers or eagle-eyed viewers might recognize that this is probably the same day, which it is. In the first episode, we spoke about being a mathematician and how you got into that and why you're passionate about that and the challenges and ways that you mitigated those. I'm curious what inspired you to start the YouTube channel, and maybe you can just describe to those that haven't seen it before what the focus is.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Sam, for having me back. It's good to be back. So the YouTube channel, the original goal was to look at the evidence behind mental health, and it was motivated a lot by my journey to understand ADHD, which I was diagnosed with when I was 31. And when I looked up videos on this, and mostly videos, a lot of people just talked about what ADHD is, and some people would talk about how to manage it, or some people would talk about how or their experiences with it. But there were just few videos on the actual evidence of it, right? And I just wanted to interrogate that evidence because why not, right? I mean, if it's a scientific thing that's been proven, then anyone should be able to question it and reach a reasonable conclusion. In this case, that ADHD exists. That's what motivated this channel. And you'll see in the beginning of the channel, the earlier videos, I do journal clubs, so I look up papers and then just read through them and try to summarize them in a more intuitive way. So it started off as here's scientific literacy. This is what it looks like. This is how you read a paper. This is how you question a paper. But now it's morphed more into the strategies I've developed of how I've managed my ADHD over time, what that looks like day to day, or how that's influenced my career, or just how to think about all of that. Because when I looked up all those papers, I became very convinced that ADHD exists. Like anything scientific, I will continue to question it, but it's at a point where I'm okay to just take it for granted and then kind of move forward with that. So things have changed from the original goal, but that's what things are at now, and it seems like people seem to find value in that.
In terms of the inception, were you coming to, was a part of the motivation that you were skeptical about ADHD, or was it more that you'd received this diagnosis, you identified with the symptoms, and wanted to understand it and kind of validate for yourself that this was real?
Yeah, it was more the latter, but um, it's also not that I doubted the existence of ADHD or the veracity. It's that when I was 31, I was finally learning that I could question literally everything. So it's like I had this shiny new tool and I just wanted to use it everywhere. So, okay, if ADHD is real, then I can approach it as if I'm skeptical and examine the evidence. And which, by the way, is also a really, really helpful thing to do with just everything, right? But especially with scientific results. They're the scientific results are there because there's evidence. And I just wanted to practice questioning and looking at the evidence for myself. A lot of reasons. I mean, I'm just curious about these things. I also have a background background in math, and I had interacted with a lot of neuroscientists and read a lot of neuroscience papers. I just wanted to utilize that skill. So it helped with all of that. Pretending like I'm a skeptic and seeing the evidence, and then seeing that okay, it holds up to scrutiny, at least the level of scrutiny that I could give it. Yeah, so that was very helpful.
You mentioned when you were doing research that you didn't find any channels that were doing that similar kind of investigation and academic research into the science. I'm curious, what made you decide to do this in a public forum such as YouTube? Was it that you perceived that there might be others like you that would be interested in that type of material, or was there another incentive to do it in a public realm?
First, I do want to highlight, kind of independent of your question, but I just want to emphasize that there were and continue to be channels that do talk about the science of ADHD, right? So my fundamental goal was about the evidence of okay, how did they go about showing that ADHD is real? But also at the time, I had noticed an increasing degree of distrust towards science. And I don't know if it's because I just happened to notice it more, or if it was actually, more and more people just distrusting it. But the most straightforward thing to do if you distrust something is to interrogate it and look at it with genuine intent. So that was one of the goals starting out. And so the only way I can share this way of thinking is to just do it publicly, right? Or an important way to share this way of thinking is to do it publicly on a platform like YouTube. So the public aspect was kind of fundamental to all of this. And then the other part of it was, at the time anyway, granted I didn't look very carefully, but not many people seemed to be talking about things like therapy and mental health, and just holistically, both the science and the day-to-day, what that looks like. And then also being just very, very forthcoming and open with my emotions. In addition to that, I just, for a long time, I believed that like toughness was about not showing emotions, right? That's a very classic masculinity thing. And if that works for you, then great. I support anyone doing that if it helps. But for me, that has never worked. Anytime I try to mask emotions in any way, it's like it takes something away from me in a very, very harmful way. So yeah, I mean, these all play a role, and I guess I just wanted to be a voice out there that talks about all these things at the same time.
Yeah, I'm curious in terms of the initial audience, because what I think makes your channel unique, let's speak about the early videos, is you're not just talking necessarily about the symptoms. There is this kind of deeper exploration into how this condition is validated. And my sense is that isn't necessarily where the core audience is that kind of consume ADHD content is, that they're kind of more interested in kind of the symptoms and potentially like ways to work with those. So who did you find was watching the videos you were making, and what was their response?
Initially, it seemed like just a very, very scientifically inclined audience. So undergrads, there were lots of undergrads, and then some older folks that just really liked science. And yeah, that was exactly the right audience. I mean, I was talking about some very technical things at times, and there were, just to my surprise, people seemed to just find enjoyment in that. And I was surprised that they even existed. I was just shocked. I'm still kind of surprised that people find my channel, and they seem to enjoy the technical aspect of this of all of this.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I think some of the terminology goes over my head, especially in terms of the videos that relate to maths as a central topic. But there's still a relatable aspect that I can understand in terms of wanting to understand something better, and then also, I think the term is parasocial, where you kind of just you build an attachment to someone, and I think maybe there's some kind of negative connotations around that term, where you've kind of like, I don't watch your videos and think, oh, here's my friend, but there's something that is relatable about the way that you present the material, your desire to understand and question things, and then also when you talk about your experiences in life and with ADHD, that draws me into the channel. And then as someone that's not a mathematician, from that I understand more about subject matter that I wouldn't necessarily. And like we spoke about in the past episode, when there's someone that's passionate about something, there's something quite infectious about that, that's just enjoyable to consume. So be it maths or that desire to research, there's not really an inherent question here. More just, I thought I'd share kind of the perspective of a consistent viewer that isn't necessarily academically astute or scientifically that kind of knowledgeable or capable, but why it still is attractive, the channel.
It really, really helps to hear that perspective. And so starting with the parasocial comment, that is something I'm maybe excessively paranoid about. I had donations at first, like a donation link, and then I removed it for a while, and then I more recently I put it back up, and then I finally decided to I think I'll just permanently get rid of those, because yeah, I want to be able to make content that connects with people, but that should be it, right? And part of the reason why I keep things so minimal in terms of editing is that when I was growing up, when I interacted with friends, it was just, there was no expectation of monetary gain on either side, right? It was just a genuine interaction, and we could question each other and be genuine. And so to this almost paranoid degree, I try to be as genuine as possible in my intent and the things I say, and accurate and honest. And the goal is, like, 15 years from now, my hope is that younger viewers will look back at the content I made and say, okay, I can see that guy was being straightforward and honest, as opposed to this other channel that was saying everything they could to extract as much money from their viewers, which, I don't know if a lot of YouTubers do that, but there's certainly an incentive, right, to monetize your channel and things. And to be forthcoming, my channel at the moment is below the threshold of monetization, but my goal always will be to never monetize it. And if I could control it, my videos would just never have ads. Unfortunately, I think YouTube will just put on ads anywhere. So for me, I do try to encourage using ad blockers or browsers that can use ad blockers. I still support YouTubers that want to monetize their channels, especially if they have great content. And I support anyone that, if you want to start that kind of business, you can certainly try it and do your best with that. But just personally, I just, I get paid well enough. I get paid a salary that personally, this is more money than I've ever been paid. It's not an obscene amount. I'm not rich, but I grew up very poor, And I've faced so much frustration with trying to learn things behind a paywall. Um, just there's so much, especially back then, back in the 2000s, there was so much content behind paywalls. Um, but yeah, there's a whole sea of topics here with social media, the positive aspects of social media. That how great is it that you and I can connect, for example, even though we've like 20 years ago, would have been impossible, effectively impossible. So yeah, I try to leverage the positive aspects of social media. Try to, I guess, remind myself first, but kind of show others, especially people that have only grown up in the social media age, that I genuinely just want to share things, my thoughts, and genuinely want to help you. And I do not want, I just want nothing. I don't want anything in return. I get more than I need, more than I thought I could get with the life that I live as it is. I guess the point is, I mean, thank you for watching, and it's very, very heartening that you pick up on that, that genuine intent. My journey was within math, but I do feel like the things that I've managed to figure out for myself aren't restricted to math, right? A lot of the content I talk about it's maybe motivated by my experiences in academia, but I do try to speak more generally. So yeah, it's really heartening again to hear you speak positively. So thank you.
Do you think you're able to kind of summarize what you found in your early videos related to ADHD?
So the classic paper was Zemetkin et al. I think it was 1990, and what they found was a concrete difference in how the ADHD brain works compared to a neurotypical brain, and in particular in like kind of the prefrontal cortex region. It was the specific paper that it was like this area that was clearly less, like scientifically less active in ADHD patients compared to neurotypicals. So from that paper, I mean, it was such a well-designed paper. That paper almost single-handedly had me convinced. But if I could summarize, we view ADHD as like a mental disorder, right? It's a mental thing. But I often feel like we say that. Certainly, I say that as if it's this ethereal kind of thing that we can't concretely put a finger on. And I've recognized, again, for myself, that I do that because the scientific community, we don't understand exactly the mechanisms, right? What is happening within the brain that's leading to that kind of difference? So the way I see it, fundamentally, mental health disorders, including ADHD, it is a physical difference. It's a physical thing. It's just that we happen to not understand it yet. So yeah, broken bone, we can see it. We know how to reset them. ADHD, how do we put our hands on it, right? It's so much harder. So I think that's the key difference. But what I found is that the evidence that the difference exists is remarkably strong.
We spoke a bit, I think, again in the previous episode about potentially the root of ADHD, and you were mentioning some traumatic experiences potentially in childhood. I think that's where sometimes one can become unsure about, okay, is this a genetic thing where there's a kind of inherent brain chemistry and that's different from the wider populace, or is this a result of experiences in childhood that when the brain is still being formed, I guess, to a certain extent, that then impact one's life and the way they experience it? Or is it like that it's kind of triggered by certain experiences, and if one had different experiences in their childhood, then potentially like it wouldn't from my perspective, the way I think about it, it doesn't matter. Regardless, you are where you're at, and you are that now, and you deal with those circumstances. But yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm not the best person to ask because there's a mix of psychology and neuroscience in that question. There are lots and lots of open questions there that even the open questions I'm actually not familiar with. So I'll just give you the kind of the broadest statement that I'm comfortable giving. And I mean, it's complicated. It's such a cop-out answer, but I speculated last time that there could be a lot of different reasons why that cause ADHD like symptoms, or just ADHD symptoms. And I don't know if that's true, but I suspect it. Um, why I suspect it, I mean, that's just very anecdotal, right? I can't. I wish I had more time to look at more closely at the literature. Um, and I've certainly heard that there's a genetic component to all of this. But let's see. So instead of just like repeating what you've said, to give you a more concrete answer specifically about the brain chemistry, yeah, I think, okay, so I think what's happening, what we're observing is these are, I suspect these are ultimately symptoms. The same way that if someone has depression, yeah, you can measure their brain chemistry and see that there's a difference with someone that doesn't have depression, but that's a symptom. That's how I see it. And you can treat the symptom. That's a fantastic, direction to go. But, I can speak for myself, having had depression and having come out of it and going back into it, just back and forth in all directions. There are so many other factors that influence that imbalance in brain chemistry, right? The brain chemistry thing is real, but, and yeah, but we have to be careful as scientists to not just focus on that and see that as like the cause of everything. And scientists are familiar with, scientists are aware of what I'm saying, right? I don't mean to disparage or trivialize anything that scientists are doing. And in fact, please take things I say with a grain of salt, because I'm a mathematical biologist in a very different field. I'm not a psychologist or a neuroscientist that thinks about these things, but we just have a lot to learn. And in my experience, as I'm growing as a person and as my ADHD symptoms get a little bit, as they get less severe, I can see there's a strong correlation with the environment that I'm in and the life that I'm living. So being in a nice environment has definitely helped all of my mental health things. But I've also been in really nice environments where it hasn't helped my mental health things. So you see, there's a very complicated chicken and egg problem of, I think there's a sophisticated interaction between the environment, the person's current state, their experiences and possible traumas, and the whatever symptoms they're experiencing. And it's a very difficult process to unwind that. But I've been reading some papers on cognitive behavioral therapy, and I think I might do a journal club video on that. It's first established in like the 60s, right? It's actually a surprisingly old method, and I can't help but just say that there's a reason why it's been so successful. I don't know exactly how to verbalize that reason, but I think it's an incredibly robust, incredibly insightful, helpful tool for therapists to use. And I think it's going to continue to be like that for the foreseeable future. And I highlight that because it's only through that process of questioning and listening, right? Whether it's with a therapist or with yourself, that you can kind of unpack all of these different factors that are contributing to your current mental state. People can give you answers as to why that is, but it's never going to be it's not going to fit your situation. Hopefully that gives you something more than, just there is evidence.
No, it definitely does. And as you talk, I come up with so many different strands that I would be interested in going down. One thought, just CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is very popular in the UK. It's kind of the NHS's, which is our National Health Service, their go-to method of talking therapy. And I think maybe adding on a bit to what you mentioned there, that I think I've had some experience of it. I think one of the benefits of CBT, if there is one, is it helps the individual to be able to have the tools to solve the challenges that are bespoke to them themselves without necessarily needing to see a professional each time and then apply it, as you say, to the particular situations. I've heard you speak about experiences with therapy that sound very similar to that, that a therapist encouraged you to recognize that the answers were inside yourself to each challenge, and that and
to be able to access them, and to not accept a prescriptive mode of support, and prescribe yourself the way through something.
That's right. Yeah. The kind of, I guess the most helpful therapy sessions. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that therapy can be helpful, but for me, the most helpful ones have been when I can discover those tools, whatever they may be. One great example is establishing boundaries. I've always had a lot of trouble with that, and through this process of questioning from the part of the therapist, I slowly discovered, kind of on my own, it really felt like my own discovery of, okay, this is why, like XYZ reason is why I need to set boundaries. Because if I don't set boundaries, then, ABC will happen, and it's just terrible. I'm going to be worse off. And I value that process so much. And, this is a very general statement that maybe might be vague, but for me, that the tool was the process of asking and questioning myself and really examining whether or not things help in the short or long term. So yeah, exactly. I mean, whatever the tool looks like, these professionals are very well equipped to help you find them.
Just going back to ADHD and the research you were doing initially, what value do you think there is in identifying the kind of either biological or neurological or environmental origins of certain kind of ways of thinking and behaving, as opposed to potentially just acceptance? Why would that be useful to have a greater understanding of the origins of ADHD?
That is a fantastic question, because you can ask that question to anything else about scientific discoveries, right? Why? So you're really asking about basic science. Why go through the process of spending millions of federal taxpayer money to do all these things? And it's that, well, yeah, it's not clear what the payoff is, right? If I was talking to someone in business, I would be very upfront about that. There's no obvious immediate payoff. And so in a vacuum, it's going to look like we're wasting a lot of money. But there's a reason why we've spent so many years as a collection of countries in this, as a scientific community, to go through the trouble of asking these questions. And it's that the potential to discover new avenues for treatment, the payoff that's the payoff, right? It's a gamble. It's a bit of a gamble, right? You don't know if the exact thing you're looking at will have that payoff, but it also happens very often that a thing you're researching has a payoff for actually a completely different thing altogether. So this is I don't know why this is the one example that popped in my head, but Viagra, for example, still more on the translational side, but it was meant to treat blood pressure. It was like a blood pressure medication, but it had this completely other effect that people discovered by accident. That's not the best example, but you see a lot of these things in physics. The NASA space missions, they created a lot of the foundational technologies that we use, just take for granted today. But as for ADHD specifically, that's, just at a high level, that's the best way I can put it. And then, therapists can use data like that to also guide their questions. For example, just again, at a very high level, we know that ADHD or executive dysfunction comes from, it's an issue in the frontal part of the brain, which is responsible for things like thinking or planning and executive function. I wouldn't be surprised if that was a basic science discovery, that like the frontal part of the brain has those specific functions, and then people found that ADHD is deficient in that part of the brain, and therefore we know ADHD, there's like a biological reason for those deficits in ADHD. And then that justifies the use of medication that targets the brain as opposed to like the heart,
What, if anything, do you think of as the kind of positive aspects of ADHD characteristics, or basically who you are? And if there were the option to be able to remove the challenges related to ADHD, say take executive function, but it also meant that you wouldn't potentially also have some other attributes that you deem as positive, would you take that trade-off?
they're so often double-edged swords, right? Because my obsession, for example, and impatience, so good for productivity and for going down rabbit holes of curiosity, especially as it relates to my research and passions. Um, and it means I'll just, I'll push myself to an extent that it just doesn't make sense. There's from the outside looking in, it might look like I'm just a little crazy. And I think, I think there are a lot of people that understand what that's like, but I didn't have control over this obsession. So when it came to dating, for example, I had for whatever reason, I had no conception of what it meant to date someone and then build up a relationship. I seemed to be better at it in high school, and then I just got terribly worse at it over time for just some reason. And that impatience, the same impatience that would get me to be so productive and learn things, would mean that I was just this angry asshole. Whenever someone that I thought I was getting close to romantically, they maybe they wouldn't reply to a text quickly enough or something, like really, really inconsequential things. So with myself, I could be infinitely impatient and just kind of push myself as much as I wanted to. But then when it came to other people, I couldn't do that. And that definitely harmed my personal life in many ways. So my ADHD traits were positive in certain contexts. I think the fact that I had so much trouble remembering things, especially as I gained more responsibilities, meant that I had to be that much more organized. So whenever I have, like this podcast, for example, I was ready to, once I got the invite, I immediately clicked the Google Calendar link so that I have the reminder right there. I check whenever there's some meeting or a hangout or anything in the future that's not going to be within 5 seconds, immediately I just go through the trouble of putting in the calendar. And it means that, at a moment's notice, I can just look at my calendar and see the events coming up for the day. And it just makes my life that much easier. So organization as a result of ADHD means that it's just, I don't know, things are better for me, and I can sometimes share my calendar, and it helps other people coordinate with me. But yeah, it's also a hard question because I've always been so hard on myself about just all the traits. I think I understand part of what you're saying, that there's this default impression that these are deficits, and so I think thinking about just venturing in the direction of, okay, but can they be positives? I think that's a very helpful thing. And unfortunately, I don't have the best answer for you at the moment, but I will say that having gone through this experience of putting myself through so much guilt and shame, because I thought I was having deficits, and then accepting that actually these are just a part of me and this is what I am and not necessarily a deficit, that process, after I've healed, now I can help people navigate that process too. I can show them, okay, this is the path I took. This is the pain that I felt. And who knows how great the pain is, but I had a lot of experiences thinking that I was the issue when actually I wasn't. And so in that sense, it's I think I've managed to turn all of this into something really positive.
Going back to when we were talking about ways of teaching, I find reading and studying with books, I found it quite difficult. And I always also do kind of what you mentioned in terms of jumping ahead and when you do that, generally I would break things eventually, or I'd just be too rash. But I do learn, I can learn better maybe through listening to something and being on a walk, and I can absorb it more than being static and being with a big textbook or watching something. So that's kind of where I'm thinking about these attributes not necessarily being deficits, just being differences, that if kind of there's a willingness to allow people to learn and organize in ways that works for them, then they're not deficits, they're differences.
Yes, and we are absolutely aligned in that. And yeah, that's what I keep trying to emphasize on my channel, is that people are going to think that you're dumb or just lazy, but okay. I mean, that's what they think, and you're welcome to fight against that or push back against that. But all I'm saying is I've tried, and it's just such a pointless fight. The people had digging their heels for no reason, and I understand that. I mean, I do that. I'm sure I do that. I know I do that with all kinds of things, and it's because people believe that they're right, and that's okay. So what matters is, like you've said many times, you're here now, and so the question is what you can do in this moment, and a key part of that is recognizing it's not necessarily deficits that we're working with. It's just it's differences that can very easily be interpreted as deficits. So I agree. Yeah, the walking example is a dream of mine, is to set up a desk with a treadmill underneath it, because I've always, something about just having my legs move has always helped me think so much. And then organization, just with physical things, it looks my living space looks very disorganized, but it's at the same time I know where things are, and it's not that I'm lazily putting things everywhere. And I think for a while I might have been doing that, but at the same time, in hindsight, I think there was some intent behind that. I just need to see things visually, and having things exposed and kind of scattered around helps with that. I understand that can be hard if you're living with a partner who doesn't prefer that could be a source of conflict. So it certainly depends on your situation, but at least being aware of it means, okay, if I can't scatter things around, what else can I do to make things visually more apparent? Maybe add labels to boxes, or I don't know, but you can see the act of questioning, right, leads to that new direction. So I'm really glad you brought that up, because I think that's becoming an increasingly important part of my channel, is accepting and recognizing that we just think differently, we operate differently. And by the way, that's helped me teach too, because sometimes students ask these seemingly irrelevant questions, and it seems like they're not listening to what I'm saying. And I realize that they're actually trying really hard to make sense of what I'm saying. And so they're asking to get broader context and kind of eliminate irrelevant things. So yeah, the more I've accepted the way that I do things differently, the more I've been able to accept students thinking differently too.
Going back to your channel, I mean, I've spoken about this before, and we potentially touched on it earlier, but I experience it as very reflective and honest. You're quite vulnerable in some of the videos, talking about personal experiences, and I resonate with that, and I find it not empowering, but like very rewarding to watch and see that kind of willingness to be oneself reflected back. How do you feel about putting that side of yourself out there in terms of the exposure, and how does it relate to your work as your professional work as a professor? Is there any kind of thinking that needs to go into that, in terms of how you present yourself and how potentially your peers will receive that?
Yeah, so I do have to be conscious about how I present myself now, more than in the past, because I now represent a university, right? I mean, I have in the past, but it was just a much more low stakes kind of a situation. My profile it's very, very slowly increasing, but it is increasing. So what I've been doing is, I do think about the videos that I've posted, and there are several that I've actually unlisted or made private, because it's very easy to take the words in a more negative way. Maybe it sounds like I'm excessively complaining for no reason, and I have to strike this balance of complaining and processing these emotions and experiences is something that I really want to show people, because that's not something that I had in my life. And I have to balance that with, not being so super negative towards people. I have to think like a almost like a public figure. So there's some of that going on. Luckily, the YouTube channel, I know that it's just by design, it's going to be small. I think it always will be small, but it's a blessing because I'm not, if I had a lot more subscribers, then I'd have to be a lot more careful about the things I say. And I'd have to be a lot more conscious about whether or not my fellow faculty will see me. But it's so small and so low profile that it's actually kind of hard to find unless you go out of your way. And so, I don't mind that level of detachment. And it's at a point where if a fellow faculty member happens to find my channel, then I'm okay with that too, right? I share the stuff that I share, and I be vulnerable and let myself be open to potential harm from others, potential manipulation from others, because I know I can handle it. Yeah, it's just the nature of being vulnerable that yeah, sometimes people are just going to be jerks, and it's almost like, it's like I show wounds publicly, and then sometimes people come along with like a handful of salt and just throw it at it just to see what happens. And I'm at a point where I can just, it doesn't really affect me too much. And I have enough confidence in myself. I've developed enough self-esteem that if someone comes along and they're kind of a jerk, it just doesn't faze me anymore. I just kind of ignore them. So that's also important for me to show, right? I want to show that, being vulnerable opens you up to some risks, but you can also develop your whatever strategies or mechanisms or confidence to the point where you can be very robust to that.
You modeling that is important to me as well, to feel that I can be myself, and I can see someone else being themselves, and that especially that you're in a position, you've got a job where you have a relatively high profile, and you're not concerned about how it's perceived by others. And I was just thinking as you're answering, well, if there were a job opportunity that watched your content and didn't want to hire you on the basis of you sharing what felt true to you and important to you, presumably that wouldn't be a place that you wanted to work anyway, because you want to work somewhere where you feel appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a big part of what I learned through partially through therapy, partially through just growing up, but it all ties in with accepting who you are and your differences, that some people will just react poorly, and it might be because of you, and it might be because you messed up, and it might be because you act differently and act in a way that just they don't like. The hard part is seeing just how much of a blessing that is. That for me has always been such a challenge. I've always wanted to be so accepted by everyone, and I really hated being disliked by people. But yeah, that growth process, and you can see it in the channel. I mean, I started off very well. I don't know how it came across, but I remember being in that state when I started the channel. I was not in a good place. I was very tired. I was very just depressed. I was very, very, very shy, terrified of everything. And slowly over time, I can see the change in myself. I mean, I know the change in myself. I don't know if I see it in my videos, but I take more stock in what I have to say, and it's not necessarily confidence for the sake of confidence. I think that's what I always had a fear of. Like, I don't want to be so delusionally confident that I miss something obvious. But the really cool thing is that the more courage I build up to accept myself for who I am, the less the less these other things matter. The transition, I will say, it's incredibly difficult, but wow, is it worth the effort?
100%. I still have moments where I feel that I'll speak to someone and I feel that they interpreted me in a way that I didn't mean. It doesn't happen as much anymore, but it happened the other day. And I reminded myself of this phrase that I like, and my coach told me, which was, let people be wrong about you. Like, I don't need to kind of convince them that or go back and be not defensive, but no, that's not what I meant. It's okay. It doesn't matter. I knew what I meant. Maybe they actually did interpret what I said the way I meant it. Who knows? In the past, I would give an abundance of context, as I mentioned before, to try to mitigate that from happening. But as I say, sometimes it just makes it more confusing and they understand less. So say what you want to say. If they have an additional question, they can ask. If they don't, and you perceive they misunderstood you, or they tell you I didn't like, it's okay.
I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, that is exactly one of the biggest things I've struggled so much with is this terror or this fear of being misunderstood. And then when I mentioned courage, I misunderstood courage too. I thought it was I thought part of it was being fearless. Actually, no, it's doing what you're talking about, where you say what you need to say, and no matter how scared you might feel, anxious you might feel, maybe even terrified, you accept the outcome of that. And if you have questions, then okay, you can clarify. But yeah, for that you've mentioned something that I know I've struggled with for basically since I can remember. And that's something that, as part of everything I do in this channel, is something that I want to convey somehow, right? That I'm not fearless. You could almost say that I'm actually feeling more fear these days. I'm feeling more embarrassment and more anxiety. But I now have somehow learned to accept that that's going to happen. And then I just do my best with the next step.
I have this question about the internet kind of affirming people and siloing them, and your channel connecting people without boxing them in. But I can't really remember exactly like what I was going for when I wrote that.
But I can talk about it because I love I love the sentiment behind it, because I do see that a lot, that social media can be so polarizing that you either, especially with politics, you're on one side or the other, and if you're not on my side, you're the enemy. I can see this with mental health to some extent, not to the same extreme, but if you don't take ADHD as a real thing, then you're an evil person, you're terrible. They're just these polarizing things. And what I want to show is that we can, the fact is that all of us are in the spectrum of understanding with everything. Everything is gray, and it's only sometimes that things get, more white or more black. And knowing things is no exception. And I just want to show people it's totally fine to not know. With this particular thing, I do this now more than before, that, if you have a different political belief, I used to be more polarized. I was kind of drawn into the one extreme, and I've pushed back against that. And now if, I welcome whether you talk about God or someone commented Project 2025 in one of my videos, and I'm just going to keep it there. Even though to me that's a very charged topic, but you know what, they're learning about ADHD, and I cannot fight polarization, and I cannot be an educator if I admonish someone for saying what they say, no matter how much it affects me personally, right? There have been many, many times when I've been so exhausted from social media and the polarization, and in my channel, I don't want to feed into that anymore. And I just want to show people that I want to have a conversation with anyone.
Your channel is just an oasis in a way, away from this is what you should believe in. I say, and it can exist within neurodivergent communities of this is how it is, and or this is how ADHD presents, or how it will be, or what you should do. It's just a kind of space, I think, of someone sharing their experiences, what they've learnt, and encouraging one to interrogate themselves and interrogate you. And I think that in its own way opens up one to thinking about that in different realms of their life, potentially politically as well, just like questioning anything that they absorb. And I think that's really positive.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. And if there is anyone watching and not understanding, because if you're like me, I did not understand the value of questioning. Like I thought I knew how to question things, but I encourage everyone to just lean into questioning to the degree, like as much as you like. And for me, there was also a part of fear of like, oh, what if I realized that something I held deeply true or like believed for a very long time as false. And that can be really disturbing. What I found is that the vast majority of things that I question turn out to be the way they are for like reasonable reasons. So it's actually, the world is not all that terrifying once you really explore this questioning direction. The 1% or that 5% of the time when things are different, that's when things get really interesting. And it is so important to lean into that. And it's, I wish I knew how to teach that thing of identifying, like not only questioning, but identifying when something contradicts your belief and then going, oh, I wonder if that's a simple misunderstanding. I wonder if I'm being manipulated. I wonder if they're working with a very different set of assumptions. I wonder if they have the same assumptions, but maybe know more than I do. I wonder if I know more than they do, right? These are all possible things that are worth examining. And the more that I've done the more the world has just made sense. Like you can see with the skills that I've developed, for example, they don't require the great amount of buy-in, right? With drawing, it's just pencil and paper. With math, it's just you and like pencil and paper again. With the YouTube channel, like minimal editing, it's just me and a camera and a microphone, and so in this vacuum of like, if I don't have this extra help, what is the thing that I can do to make sense of things when I'm hurt, when I'm confused, when I'm frustrated? And it just comes back to questioning. But yeah, wow, it is so much better to be scared and ask questions and be scared of the answers and listen to them anyway, than to avoid questions and feel safe, right? And of course, the world is not such a dichotomy, but that's just what's in my head these days. I'm gonna lean into that fear and doubt and just keep asking until things make sense to me, and just demand that, right?
Oh, I didn't talk about the mission, but I remember seeing that on your channel years ago and being quite inspired by that. Just that idea of like having clarity about what you're looking to achieve, seeing as a project, here's what I'm looking to achieve with this, and guiding what you make. And that can change the mission. And I imagine you've changed the mission statement potentially, but I just saw that I hadn't seen that before, and I was quite inspired by that. It was quite helpful.
That's great. Yeah. And I will say the current mission statement, it's in a bit of state of flux. I haven't changed it since, I changed it, I think earlier this year. I haven't changed it since, but it's a bit of a placeholder because my entire state of mind is in a state of flux. I'm happy that I'm very, very lucky that my professional life is on a fantastic trajectory. It'll be perfectly fine. But personally, I've discovered just, for myself, and I understand other, this is not like a novel discovery, but discovered for myself about this questioning thing. And I've just been going on this journey of discovering things that so many people consider basic. Just humanity. Why do people choose to be kind and empathetic? Why do we care so much about morals? Why is it that so many cultures across time and space value things like courage and truth? And all I know is I'm moving along this journey of questioning everything, and it's going somewhere. I don't know where it's going. So in that sense, the mission statement is consistent with that journey. But yeah, it's more of the statement now is like more of a description of what I'm doing as opposed to like an actual goal. So we'll see where things go. But yeah, I will say it's so heartening as I do these things and I step into a lot of fear, right? I'm learning to do things in ways that I either avoided or just chose not to do because I was so scared. But as I do them, I start meeting people like you that have thought about similar things, in particular, just questioning everything. And I just get a lot of this affirmation that, okay, I'm going in the right direction. And again, I don't know what this direction is. I just know I'm going there. So yeah, we'll see where things go. I don't know where I'm going. All I know is that I have a career. I'm figuring out my personal life and resolving a lot of baggage, and I'll just continue to share that process with people. And I just, aside from the goal, I really I hope that my genuine intent comes through, and I really hope it helps people.
From my perspective, I can't speak for anyone else, but I have a sense it's the same. It does, and yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me. We've been speaking for a while, and yeah, I'm very grateful and have really enjoyed speaking with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. It was an absolute pleasure.
So that was the second part of my conversation with Youngmin Park. If you haven't already, I encourage you to check out part 1, where Youngmin speaks about his journey to becoming a mathematics professor, a mathematical biologist with ADHD, and how those strengths and challenges influenced his journey. So a huge thanks to Youngmin again for his openness and generosity in sharing his experiences. I would encourage you to check out his YouTube channel, ADHD Mathematician, where he continues to reflect on these themes in thoughtful and constructive ways, and I'll link it below in the description. If this episode resonated, please do like the video and share it with someone that you think might enjoy it. Any comments or questions you have, I'm really open to, so please do leave them below. And yeah, subscribe to the channel to be notified of future episodes. Thanks again for watching.